Linnea Strand was the girl everyone loved, bright, kind, and full of promise. Henrik Malmgren was the quiet janitor with the troubled past. Their lives should never have crossed, but when Linnea vanished on a snowy morning in Sundsvall, Sweden, their names became forever linked in a chilling mystery. What followed was a chain of discoveries so haunting, so heartbreaking, that it gripped an entire nation. This isn't just a story about a missing girl, it's a story about secrets buried deep, a predator hidden in plain sight, and a truth that came far too late. In the quiet Swedish town of Sundsvall, nestled between snowy hills and pine forests, life moved at a calm and predictable pace. That peace shattered on the morning of January 14, 2018, when 17-year-old Linnea Strand vanished without a trace. It was a Sunday, and Linnea had plans to meet a friend at the local library to study for exams. She left her house around 8:30 a.m., bundled up in a green parka, a knit scarf, and black boots. The sun had not yet fully risen, and the streets were still dusted with untouched snow. Her footprints were visible along the neighborhood sidewalk, trailing off toward the main road. But somewhere between home and the library, she disappeared. Linnea was not the kind of girl to simply run away. Her parents, both respected members of the community, described her as responsible, studious, and deeply rooted in her routines. Her father, Anders Strand, was a well-known high school principal. Her mother, Marit, worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Linnea was their only child. Her sudden absence caused immediate concern. When she didn't show up at the library and didn't respond to messages, her friend called Linnea's mother, who, in turn, called the police. By nightfall, the entire town was on edge. Flashlights flickered in the woods as volunteers combed through snowy trails. Police dogs sniffed for her scent. Helicopters scanned the frozen lake nearby, Lake Holmsen, where local teenagers often gathered during the summer. Nothing turned up. The lake had frozen over just days before, and authorities feared she might have fallen through thin ice. But there were no cracks, no signs of struggle, and no belongings left behind. The only thing found was a small silver hairclip lying in the snow near the lake's southern path. It was delicate, shaped like a butterfly, and partially buried under a soft layer of snow. Linnea's best friend confirmed it was hers. She wore it almost every day. This tiny object was the only physical clue in an otherwise invisible disappearance. Police marked the area and intensified their search, focusing on the lake and surrounding woods. Divers broke through the ice but found nothing beneath the surface. The media quickly picked up the story. Linnea's photo, smiling, brown hair framing her face, eyes full of light, was broadcast across the country. Hashtags trended online. People who had never met her joined search parties. Candlelight vigils were held in nearby cities. Sweden, a country not used to such stories, especially involving a young, innocent girl from a good family, was stunned. The calm image of Sundsvall shattered. Despite nationwide attention, days turned into weeks. Tips came in. People thought they saw her at train stations, in restaurants, in other towns, but none of them led anywhere. There was no ransom call, no messages, no CCTV footage showing where she went. Her bank account was untouched. Her phone last pinged near the lake and then went silent forever. Her family refused to give up hope. Her father recorded a video pleading for her return. Her mother began leaving the porch light on every night, but behind closed doors, they feared the worst. The town, once full of chatter and laughter, grew quieter. Something dark had passed through, and it left behind only questions and a silver butterfly in the snow. 6 months after Linnea's disappearance, Just as summer arrived and the snow had long melted from the trees and hills, a grim discovery stirred up the case once more. On a warm June morning, a fisherman named Lars Vikland was out on Lake Holmsund, casting his line near the southern shore. As his boat drifted close to a patch of tangled reeds, his line caught on something beneath the water's surface. He assumed it was debris or a branch, but when he pulled it up, it was a torn piece of dark green fabric, faded and water-damaged. The police were called immediately. Forensics later confirmed it was part of Linnea's school jacket. Divers returned to the lake that week, this time focusing on a new area based on where the fabric had been found. 2 days into the search, buried in silt near the lakebed, they uncovered a backpack. It was faded, moldy, and partially torn, but it contained several items that belonged to Linnea: a worn-out notebook with her handwriting, her earbuds, and a small candy wrapper with the brand she always carried in her coat pocket. However, there was one item inside that did not belong to her: a candy wrapper with fingerprints. The prints didn't match Linnea or anyone in her family. After running the prints through their system, police identified the owner as Henrik Malmgren, a 42-year-old man who had previously worked as a maintenance worker at Linnea's school. He had been let go 3 years earlier due to erratic behavior, and although he had a minor criminal record mostly for trespassing and petty theft, he had never been involved in anything violent. When police visited his home, a rundown property on the outskirts of town, Henrik appeared calm but evasive. He claimed he hadn't been near the lake in over a year and didn't remember ever owning that brand of candy. He denied knowing Linnea personally. Despite his denial, the police secured a warrant to search his home. What they found raised even more questions. In his basement, under a pile of old clothes, was a coat that closely matched the missing green parka Linnea was last seen wearing. It was damaged and stained, but no blood or DNA could be recovered from it. The coat was consistent in style and color, but without a definitive identifier, such as a tag or initials. They couldn't confirm it was Linnea's. Investigators also found newspaper clippings about her disappearance in his kitchen drawer, neatly stacked and dated. Henrik was taken in for questioning again, but maintained his innocence. He said he collected newspaper clippings about many missing people, not just Linnea. With no hard evidence, police had no choice but to let him go. Rumors spread quickly in Sundsvall. Whispers filled cafes and grocery stores. People began avoiding Henrik's property, crossing the street rather than walking past his gate. The town's fragile peace, already shaken, now felt like it was breaking. Everyone wanted answers, but instead, all they got were more disturbing pieces of a puzzle that refused to come together. The silver hair clip had been just the beginning. Now, there was a backpack, a stranger's fingerprints, and a man who might have known more than he admitted, all circling around the dark heart of the lake. A full year passed since Linnea Strand vanished, and for many, hope had begun to dim. Her case had faded from headlines, replaced by new tragedies and stories. But just as the town of Sundsvall began to settle into a painful silence, something unexpected brought the mystery roaring back to life. In a small village outside Gothenburg, a priest found an unmarked envelope in the mailbox of a countryside church. Inside was a folded piece of paper that read, "To the people of Sweden," signed simply with the initials L's. The letter claimed that Linnea was alive and had escaped a prison made of walls and silence. It said she was somewhere safe, and that she could not return, but asked the country not to forget her. At first, authorities thought it was a hoax, but handwriting analysts compared the letter to Linnea's school assignments and concluded that it was highly likely she had written it. There were no fingerprints on the paper, no DNA on the envelope, and the ink had smudged from rain, making parts of the message unreadable. Still, the letter was enough to ignite a firestorm. News outlets returned to the story, headlines once again filled with Linnea's name, and public interest soared. People were split. Some believed the letter was a desperate cry for help, others thought it was a cruel fabrication meant to stir false hope. In the week that followed, 4 more letters appeared, each left in random locations across Sweden: on a park bench in Umeå, at a bus stop in Malmö, inside a library book in Rebro, and at a flower stall in Stockholm. Each letter shared the same tone: cryptic, emotional, and full of symbolic language. One said, "He still watches from the place with no mirrors." Another included the phrase, "Tell my mother the dog is still waiting," which immediately caught the attention of Linnea's parents. They confirmed that Linnea had a childhood dog named Otto, who passed away a year before her disappearance. That detail had never been made public. Authorities were divided. Some investigators argued the letters were part of a coordinated hoax, possibly from someone who had obsessed over the case. Others were less certain. The use of personal details, the consistency of the handwriting, and the strange but coherent language suggested something real, something authentic. Then came the biggest twist: surveillance footage from the park bench in Umeå where one letter had been placed. A hooded figure was seen walking alone, pausing at the bench, and slipping something beneath it before walking away. When the video was enhanced, investigators noted a key detail: the person was wearing a coat almost identical to Linnea's green parka. The footage was grainy, the lighting poor, and the face impossible to see, but the resemblance was unsettling. The discovery left the country with more questions than answers. Was Linnea alive, hiding from someone, or had someone else learned her secrets? Was the coat a coincidence, or was she trying to send a message from a distance? The letters, full of fear and poetry, hinted at something darker still lurking in the shadows, something, or someone, that had not let her go. 2 years after Linnea Strand vanished, her name still lingered in conversations like a ghost, always there, just beneath the surface. The country had not forgotten her, though the search had slowed and the media moved on. Then, in August 2020, a raging forest fire in the remote woodlands of Värmland revealed something no one could have expected. A fire crew, battling thick smoke and falling ash, stumbled across an old cabin half buried by trees and overgrown vines. It was not listed in any local property records, and from the outside, it looked abandoned for years. The fire had scorched one side of the roof, threatening to collapse it. When firefighters entered to check for embers, one of them fell through the floorboards and into something much darker than smoke. Beneath the cabin was a crawl space. It wasn't deep, only about 4 feet high, but it had been carefully hidden. Inside, they found bones scattered, partially buried in a corner, covered with soot and dust. Police were immediately called. Forensic teams arrived, and within days, the DNA results were in. The remains were confirmed to be Linnea Strand. The news shocked the entire nation. After years of wondering, hoping, and fearing, Sweden finally had an answer. But that answer came with even more disturbing revelations. It was clear from the condition of the remains that Linnea had not died immediately after she vanished. The bones showed signs of healing fractures and stress markers that indicated prolonged captivity. She had been alive for weeks, maybe even months after her disappearance. A tattered calendar pinned to one of the crawlspace walls had many dates marked with small, shaky lines, and one word repeated again and again: alone. The space also contained children's books, a worn-out blanket, an old oil lamp, and a metal tin engraved with the initials, HDM. It was the same initials as Henrik Malmgren, the man whose fingerprints had been found on Linnea's backpack and who had once been suspected, but never charged. The discovery reignited suspicion around Henrik, but there was a complication. He had died 6 months earlier in a car accident. He had left behind no written confession, no diary, no phone data that pointed to involvement. Yet his name kept appearing in the shadows of the investigation. Though there was no direct evidence linking him to the cabin, the tin with his initials and the newspaper clippings found in his house earlier suggested some kind of obsession, or perhaps more. What disturbed investigators most was not just that Linnea had died in that crawl space, but that she had likely been moved there. The distance between the lake where her belongings were found and the cabin was over 300 kilometers. Someone had transported her, kept her hidden, and then disappeared without leaving any clear trail. As the fire smoldered and the ash settled, detectives were left with a body, a broken timeline, and 1,000 unanswered questions. And then, tucked away in a drawer beneath a broken desk inside the cabin, they found an envelope with a final message, dated just weeks before Linnea's estimated death. It read, "The lake only hides what we refuse to see." Months after Linnea's remains were found beneath the burned cabin in Vermland, the investigation into her death grew more complicated rather than clearer. The public demanded closure, but the deeper the police dug, the more fragmented the picture became. Henrik Malmgren, the initial suspect, was dead and unable to answer questions. The letters supposedly written by Linnea remained a mystery, authentic in tone and style, but disconnected from any known timeline. And the most haunting element, the final message found in the cabin, "The lake only hides what we refuse to see," left investigators chasing shadows. Then, an accidental discovery reopened the case in an entirely unexpected direction. In early 2021, a young officer named Elias Schaberg was tasked with digitizing cold case records. While reviewing files connected to Linnea's disappearance, he noticed something strange. On a school alumni webpage, where old class photos were posted, Linnea's image from her final year looked subtly altered. Her eyes, when zoomed in at high resolution, contained faint, almost invisible letters etched so finely they were missed during earlier investigations. With the help of digital enhancement software, the letters were revealed to be GPS coordinates. The coordinates pointed to a secluded area 10 kilometers from the burned cabin, deep in the forest. Investigators followed the path and came across a hollowed-out tree, its interior blackened with age, but dry and intact. Hidden inside was a notebook, protected in a weatherproof bag. It was partially damaged, pages crumbling at the edges, but still readable. What it contained was devastating. The notebook appeared to have been written by Linnea during her captivity. Her handwriting was shaky and uneven, the entries filled with scattered memories, lists of dates, and cryptic observations. She described being taken by someone she initially trusted, someone who had worked at her school, but not Henrik. Instead, she mentioned another man by nickname only, the Watcher. She wrote that he used Henrik as a decoy, manipulating attention away from himself. The notebook explained that Henrik had provided the cabin, possibly unknowingly, while the Watcher had planned everything else. Linnea described failed escape attempts, her struggle to keep hope alive, and the moment she realized no one was coming. One passage stood out above the rest. She wrote, "He makes me write the letters. He says if people believe I'm safe, they'll stop looking. This confirmed what many had feared: the letters were real, but forced. Linnea had not been hiding. She had been controlled, used as a tool in a cruel deception. Her final entries grew more frantic. She knew the end was near, and her last words, scribbled in uneven handwriting, read, "He is still free. He watches these stories." The identity of the watcher was never confirmed. No forensic evidence was found in the tree or on the notebook. The case remains open, but without new leads, progress has stalled. Each year on the anniversary of her disappearance, a single silver hairclip is placed on the steps of the church in Sundsvall. No one sees who leaves it. Some say it's her mother. Others whisper that it's him, still watching, still out there. The truth remains hidden, like the lake's depths, still and cold, guarding secrets no one dares to disturb.